Because we've had issues, and I'm just looking at the stories that we've seen, that you go to the police, you make a statement, then after that you come and change and make a different statement that contradicts with the first one. How much of a problem is that? It's a problem. It depends on under what circumstances. Because there's the one you get arrested. I was in shock. No, there's one you get arrested and you start yapping. You know, though you're told everything you say can and will be used against you. So you can just start yapping at the point of arrest and you say something. But now when you go into the station, you're given what they call, when they take your statement under caution. When now you're told, we are formally taking your statement and now we are recording everything you're saying. Sometimes at that time, maybe you have settled and now you give a more coherent statement. Then you get legal advice and you're told, by the way, you ought not have said that. Then you said, you know what, I'm actually going to change my statement again. The problem with that is that off the bat, you give yourself off as being an unreliable witness. Every inconsistency... But it's not necessarily a crime to change my statement because my lawyer has advised me because you have a right to not inflict, to not incriminate yourself. You have a right to do whatever you can to protect yourself because it's deemed to be self-preservation. However, in terms of law, what that does, it dents your credibility as a witness. Because when you take the stand, or even in court, the court observes everything, including your demeanor. When people are talking, how you look like you're reacting to the information, is things that are taken into account. And part of the evidence will be, you know what, we spoke with this person 3 times. This time was not under caution. This one was a statement under caution. This one was a statement with his counsel. And the 3 times he said something different. Off the bat, you have no credibility. So it dents...
Yes, and it actually then becomes very challenging for you, especially if you are the accused person. Because when you are an accused person, you are supposed to be convincing the court to believe, you know, in you and in your statement. So once you change your statement, that's it. So when you keep changing your statement, it means you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are, you know, on the wrong, but it just piles up to all the negatives. But this is a kind of legal advice, as you said, a lawyer would tell you, but that probably you should not have said this. It was not necessary to say this. I would actually, ordinarily, I would advise people. In fact, if you, even if you look at a lot of the cases in the US, where a lot of people are generally more aware, I watch a lot of Crime and Investigation Network, and whenever somebody thinks or realizes that the line of questioning seems to suggest that they are either a person of interest or a suspect. Because when you're a person of interest, there's a difference between you being a person of interest and a suspect. Because when you're a person of interest, it means the prosecution may not have gathered enough to make you a suspect, but they think that you know a lot that makes you of very great concern to them. But the moment you notice that any of them notices that they're being treated as a person of interest, they lawyer up. They'll tell you, no, I want a lawyer immediately. Because, you know, I always see people just, you know, people just going. Even going on the media. I see even sometimes things have happened in the media, even people who look like they could be charged. Yeah, you know, then, we like storytelling even without knowing proper facts. And you need to know when you are likely to be in the mix, and when you're likely to be in the mix, I think a lot of people are saying, "Oh, you know, why is Jackie not coming forward and all that?" But she needed legal advice. She needed time off, maybe for counseling, legal advice, so that when she comes out, she needs the advice of a lawyer. Let's go back to this friend who's just been informed that I've just been informed by my friend that he or she has committed a crime. Should I call a lawyer immediately for legal advice or just rush to the police? I could be in trouble. And I think that's the kind of fear many Kenyans have. You know, the kind of relationship we have with the police. Do I just rush to the police and say, yes, I've been told this and this and the other? Call your lawyer. Yeah, no, that one you call your lawyer. Because the problem, again, if you rush to the police and you've got this grand story of something that has happened, our Kenya police, unfortunately, their socialization is, kama unajua yo maneno, ndani, uko nini, utasemea ndani. So you'd rather talk to a lawyer first and tell them, okay, this is what I have. Maybe even do a statement. You know, these anonymous tip-offs, they say we acted on information. That's how they come across this information. If somebody writes an anonymous thing and tells them, you look here, here, and here, and here, you'll find what you're looking for. And that's somehow how you can react to that. And then also it depends on the crime. If it's somebody stole the stapler at work, I mean, that's, you can talk about that and
laugh about it. But if it's something serious, not like if it's murder or if it's, I know where the body is. Such information is the type, if you keep quiet with it, it could bury you. So you better find a lawyer. In fact, I like the word you're using, Mheshimiwa, lawyer up. Just yeah, you turn up and say, I've got this sort of information and this is how anti-treated. And I find sometimes if you've got information that you're not very sure about, rather than trying to go directly to the police station, maybe you want to try talking to DCI. Because they're criminal investigators. Yes. Yeah. So tell them, look, this is the type of information I have. Because our local police stations have a criminal investigation department, but that is run basically on the, you know, the chicken thief, the estate manenos. But if it's something that you think this might be bigger than I understand, that one, if you report to DCI, they have the machinery to keep digging beyond just what you're telling them. And
this speaks a lot to the kind of relationship we have. You see, in other jurisdictions in the United States where we keep watching movies from Hollywood, approaching the police, approaching investigators is something so easy. Even thinking I should call a lawyer is something that just comes up like this. But for Kenyans, for many Kenyans, it's what do I do now? Do I disappear for a while? Do I...
No, don't disappear. I don't think it's wise to disappear. I always get amazed actually when I hear that somebody, is like for instance, recently, I saw some people were being sought after in Homa Bay, you know, the Homa Bay County, and then they ran away. I'm like, are you nuts? You can never run away unless you want to go for your entire life, because either way, finally you will get back. And when you get up, the long arm of the law will eventually, you know, catch up with you. So what I would advise is there's legal organizations that offer free legal advice. Look for those organizations. I will give you an example. When I was a lawyer in FIDA many years back, and there was a young girl who, I think it was a story of some kidnapping of some Asian guy. He was kidnapped and eventually, you know, murdered. And then it turns out that there was a young lady who was a university student, and it's a boyfriend who had allegedly, you know, been involved in all this. So she was actually right in the mix of things. What did she do? At first, she tried hiding, and then finally she went to her cousins. The cousins brought her to me as a lawyer. And immediately, you know, we took over. We are the ones who presented her to the police. Well, once we knew all the facts, we presented her.
It's much better when you go with your lawyer to the police.
Yes, it's much better when you go with your lawyer to the police. So we are the ones who presented her to the police, indicated her circumstances. Unfortunately, I left before the matter ended, so I really don't know how it ended up. But when we took her to the police, of course, there were, you know, they treated her much more differently from than if she had gone, you know, on her own.
Just looking at the kind of criminal, well, murder-related cases we're looking at, how much information do you think we have as Kenyans on how these things are handled? Probably the people who are rich and understand that probably need an alibi, they would be working on strengthening that line of that storyline. But the rest of us, do we really know what to do next?
You know, the simplest thing, even if you're part of the crime, the simplest thing to do is do as little as possible. Because trying to make it better usually makes it worse. It's like a stain on a white shirt. If you just leave it to dry and then you try and flick it off, it works. But if you see and you pick a wet cloth and you try to rub, you make it muddy and you make it worse. And so, like, if I was caught up in a situation like this, first thing, silence. Don't talk to anybody. Don't say as little as possible. Be as economical with the truth as possible until you know exactly what you feel.
But don't lie.
Not
also.
the truth.
No, not
be
lying.
economical with your words.
With your words, yes.
Yes.
Like we are saying, talking to the media, giving statements,
and that's
wanting
the problem.
to... That makes things worse.
The number of calls we get in our newsroom of people trying to report crime instead of going to the police is amazing, because people think first thing you do in Kenya, just call the media.
Expose it to the media.
Well, I guess the challenge with that also in Kenya is that sometimes, as we have said, people's experiences with the police is very challenging. So what people would do is sometimes they give an anonymous tip to the media, which is okay, because I don't think there's anything wrong, especially if you can give an anonymous tip to the media so that the media can, in that sense, report the crime. But if you are of so close a nexus, like the girl that I'm talking about, where her boyfriend is the one who was charged, he was actually, you know, shot and killed in the process. So if your boyfriend is so caught up in the mix, and you are around the circumstances, like now this university student I was representing, then you need legal advice, and you need it urgent. If you can't afford it, like this girl I'm talking about, she came to me when I was in FIDA, and there are many organizations that are able to. Even there's now, you know, a government legal aid scheme that gives.
That many people don't have an idea about.
Yes.
And you're talking about being economical with the words, but surely when you decide to talk to the media, they will get all they can from you, because that's what you do. When you come to tell the media, you want to tell the whole story. Is it safe? Is it something that you should do instead of just...
No, you shouldn't. But I think when somebody has a light in your face, because I think there was a gentleman I saw who was busted with some drugs or something about 2-3 weeks ago, and the media were there when he was being busted, because it was this big ring that was being broken. And he was giving an interview as he was being arrested. So easy vitu hapana naishi peke yangu. Hapana nilifanya kila kitu peke. And I'm thinking, boss, keep quiet. Leave the man with the camera and the microphone alone. Deal with the police, because it is you in peril. But I think Kenyans are not aware that those words that you speak, like that footage becomes part of evidence. They'll just go to the media house and tell them, you know what, we want that footage. And I keep telling people, even if it's a simple investigation, if you're not talking to it's a police officer, you're in a formal setting where now you have to cooperate. If you realize, like you're saying, if you realize this might land me in trouble, you're like, okay, fine, let's go, you put me in and make a call and tell somebody come and meet you so that you can deal with it. Because we don't understand the power of self-incrimination. You're your first witness. When you're in a criminal case, you're your first line of defense. If your first line of defense is weak and punctured, then nobody else can come and say, but you know, Joy is a very good person. If I've already said, you know, nauaga mara moja moja lakini si kila siku. Even if Indimuli comes and says, me, I've never seen a killing. I've already said so we need to learn how to not incriminate ourselves.
And then I find it very interesting. Yesterday I was talking to one of the, you know, people who are assisting me at home. And then he was telling me, you know, I think, you know, you know, he's a handyman, and he was telling me, you know, I think the best lawyers are people who grew up at home, around crimes, or people who grew up in the slums, around crimes. They make the best lawyers. And that in itself gives you people's perception about the law, because he has his own notions about how the law, you know, kind of works. And when I was discussing with him, I said, why do you think so? And according to him, it's because you've seen, you know, how criminals behave, you can justify, you can explain. Law doesn't work like that. It's not about being able to justify and explain. And sometimes the way we think the law operates is very different. Like I always, you know, sometimes people would find it very shocking. Like I dealt a lot with cases of sexual and gender-based violence when I, you know, in the past. And then you find a case where, say, somebody is charged with rape, and the public actually catch him in the act. And they go to court, and then if he's found not guilty, then the people say, no, but we caught him right in the act. Yes, you caught him in the act, but the police fail to actually, and the police actually go and, you know, even test this guy and test the girl. So there's this thing about the girl, yes, the girl was raped, and yes, the suspect was also tested. But did you correlate the guy you know, whatever you got from the guy with what was found on this girl? So sometimes the police always fail that. You know, and that is why then when you go to court, you find the magistrates telling you, you know, because sometimes I used to feel very sad. The magistrates will tell you that I am so convinced that this guy did the act, but unfortunately the evidence presented before me is defective. And that's why for a long time we insisted on special prosecutors that are trained, and the government has actually now given that, even in such cases, that are able to understand. And I'm very thrilled that if you look at the office of the DPP now, the level of, you know, of prosecutors that you have there, you know, their training levels now is pretty good.
Because it is said that quite a number of people behind bars serving jail time could be innocent, probably due to lack of knowledge, due to lack of access to legal advice. They did not defend themselves the way they should have, probably they just suffered from a general lack of knowledge and therefore paying time behind bars. You've mentioned the kind of free services offered even by the government that even I am not even aware of. Which are some of these avenues that you can actually use in case you're caught in such a situation that you can actually access legal advice even without money?
There's various NGOs. Okay, there's the National Legal Aid Project, which is still in the kinks have not yet been worked out properly. But how it's supposed to work is for serious crimes where you're facing the peril of death, or you're facing life imprisonment, or you're facing an extended period of time in jail, where the state should be able to afford every person with a state attorney. So you're told if you can afford an attorney, call him. If you cannot, the state is going to give you an attorney. So that's part of what the Legal Aid Project is supposed to do. It's also supposed to work with lawyers who offer their services what you call pro bono, but the government comes in to cover disbursements. Because, you know, what you pay in legal fees is not just for the lawyer turning up. There's everything, from the photocopying of all the evidence, turning up at the police station, interviewing all the witnesses. Because now if your advocate does a proper job in a criminal investigation, they'll receive all the witness statements, but they'll also try and see if they can get an interview with as many as possible. So there's plenty of disbursements that goes round. So the National Legal Aid Project is supposed to cover some of those costs. So not pay the entire amount, but say, give every lawyer, let's say, ballpark figure, a 30K stipend, so that you can cover those expenses. So that's what the National Legal Aid Project is supposed to do. Okay. Right now, there's actually a pro bono scheme for what you call pauper briefs. So those who are on death row, robbery with violence or murder or treason, if you need an advocate and you're facing the peril of death, right now you actually should be able to get somebody from the government. And all the lawyers are supposed to volunteer in the pro bono lawyer scheme to be able to represent such people. But there are various NGOs that offer near pro bono services. Most of them is not purely pro bono. You'll cover some disbursements, but you should be able to get, at least legal advice should be free. But if they have to go to court on your behalf, even like what FIDA does, they train you in self-representation. I know even the Christian Legal Education Aid and Research, CLEAR, does the same. There's Kituo that does the same with land issues and with refugee issues. So there are several NGOs that offer, even Cradle does, and can. So there are quite a few that deal. Others are channeled to children, others is women, others is land and refugees. They have their own little pockets, but they actually regularly offer some legal aid of some sort. Then there are those who actually go to the prisons and now just give you training. They tell you, look, we're not going to go to court for anything, but you come with your papers and we can help you prepare a defense. And I tell you, the law school in prison is very efficient. People get themselves acquitted from that law school. Because if you're the one facing, right now, the unfortunate statistics is that 48% of the people in jail, counted as jail population, are people in remand. They can't even afford bail to do the case from outside. How are they going to afford the lawyer? So if they get some rudimentary... You're already at a disadvantage
because you're already confined.
And the people who actually stay long in remand, by the time you're being sentenced, you're just sentenced to time served. Because you even served a longer time in remand than you would have been sentenced to. If you've been in remand for 2 years and the maximum sentence is 6 months.
What you're getting from this discussion is that if you find yourself in any such situation, the best thing to do is to lawyer up.
Yes,
especially
get legal advice.
Then you can start from there.
When you are so close, or your nexus to the crime is so close, either by association or by circumstances, don't just go yapping, because you find that you put yourself in an awkward situation without realizing. Sometimes things that may have happened because of a variety of reasons. Sometimes you are not very familiar about how issues relate, how certain things operate. And so a lawyer would be able to advise you about all those circumstances. Instead of going and sometimes you say things that then you end up, incriminating yourself.
You end up in remand when you should be probably working on
you should actually be the one helping the prosecution. You end up like...
because you end up
accused. Yes, you look like you're hiding when perhaps all you didn't know was, how do I deal with sort of this situation? How do I deal with it?
And remember,
but these days there's plea bargaining where you may know something about it and maybe you are an accessory after the fact and you realize, the peril I'm facing is unintended. You can choose to cooperate with the police and tell them, look, I can help you fill some of these gaps, cut down investigation time and save you investigation money, but you have to help me out here because I'm an unwitting participant in this situation. So they tell you, fine, we'll talk with the DPP, we'll see what sort of deal we can cut. And that now is happening in Kenya, actually, where you started as an accused person, but you end up being a state witness. Because it's the state that charges all. I mean, even if it's me who has been offended, it will not be Joy Masinde now prosecuting against Fred Ndimuli. It's Republic versus Fred Ndimuli. So I become part of the Republic. So I say, okay, fine. I'll be found culpable for this. I'll plead guilty for this. Sentence me for this. Maybe a lesser crime. Okay. And then I turn a state witness and say, okay, fine. I'll give you the information that now will really nail this thing.
And in exchange, I get some lenience or something.
Yes, it's not exoneration, lenience.
I think one other thing I've noticed in this process, is I know it's something that people don't like are saying, especially now when you have victims. And I want to say that I'm usually very concerned about victims of crime because most of my legal work I dealt with victims of crime. Yeah, that's why I even pushed a victim protection law, which is now a Victim Protection Act that looks at greater protection of victims of crime. But having said that, I think we need to stay true to the rule of law. And part of the issues that we've talked about, even if you look at the Victim Protection Act, is we say that there should be no discrimination in the dispensation of justice. And that therefore means that it doesn't matter whether you come from Korogosho. You should be treated justly and fairly. But there's a new form of discrimination that is also based on status. But it is a discrimination based on privilege status. That if I am Millie Odhiambo, I am arrested, then because of the public outcry, the courts might treat me, you know, not very well. Because then if I'm treated well, then the court will be seen to be shielding the high and mighty. What I would want to say is the court need to be consistent. They need to treat the poor from the slums well, and they need to treat the high and mighty well. So it goes back as a challenge to our courts. Be consistent in the application of the rule of law. If you look at the Constitution and what the Constitution intended, was that even in whichever cases, now there is no, you know, in the past there were crimes that were not bailable. If you are charged with you know, robbery with violence and murder, what all criminals used to say is stroke or two. If you say, what are you charged with, they tell you I'm charged with stroke or two. So all those ones were never bailable. But with the Constitution 2010, they are now bailable. And unless there are really strong, you know, circumstances that should preclude you from being granted bail, we need to be consistent. That if we can be able to give the guy from Korogosho bail, we need to give the person from Karen bail. Wow. I think we need to be consistent. It is discrimination cuts both ways. Yes. You can discriminate on, against me because I'm privileged, and you can discriminate against me because I'm poor. I think most of us are used to discrimination against the poor. Yeah. But we never think about...
Now we're seeing it on the other side.
Yes, there is a growing discrimination also.
It is a very interesting time. We're in a very interesting times now that we get to interact a lot more with this legal discussions, issues to do with murder cases, murder trials, because these are the kind of headlines we've been looking at. Issues to do with corruption as well, issues to do with courts, people getting arrested, getting bailed out, some people going to hospital and claiming they are unwell, all these things. But what we can say is that ignorance is no defense in law. Lawyer up. Once you figure out that you could be in any kind of trouble or legal challenge, the first thing you do is get legal advice. We say that as we take a look at this big headline, detectives probe Maribe lover's suicide attempt, and the expectation is that Jackie Maribe will be presented before court today. Whether or not she'll be charged, we still do not know. Another suspect as well, another person who's been, let me say, person of interest, will also be arraigned today. Whether or not they'll be charged and what exactly they'll be charged with, we still do not know.